Volcanic ash falls like snowflakes. In the boundless darkness, the screams of women, the cries of babies, and the anguished roars of men can be heard. Some still hope for salvation from the gods, while others desperately long for death. The apocalypse has arrived. The story is set during the era of ancient Rome, in 62 AD. A Celtic tribe was brutally massacred. A young boy watched his father die beneath a sword. His mother, in her attempt to protect him, was trampled under the hooves of horses, her bones shattered. The boy dared not cry out, lying silently on the ground, pretending to be a small, lifeless corpse. Later, he was thrown into a pit, pressed tightly against the corpses of his people. Using the lingering warmth from their dead bodies, the boy fell into a deep sleep. When the first light of dawn broke, he awoke from the cold. Looking up, he saw his parents hanging upside down from a tree, their bodies blending into the dry, gnarled branches. Hatred filled his heart, but there was nothing he could do. He was too young and weak even to bury his parents. He wandered aimlessly through the forest, not knowing where his journey would end. A torrential downpour battered his frail body, leaving him trembling. Suddenly, a group of fierce-looking men grabbed him and lifted him high, inspecting his teeth as if he were livestock. Thus, the last Celt, Milo, became a slave. 17 years later, the capital of Britannia was shrouded in a curtain of rain, but the dense downpour could not wash away the stench of blood in the arena. Slaves fought each other to the death in the gladiatorial pit, with victory only declared when one side perished. The spectators in the stands hurled insults at the corpses of the defeated and cheered for the victors, reveling in the thrill that violence brought them. The once weak boy had grown into the fiercest killing machine. He stepped over countless corpses to become a champion. After this battle, Milo was sold as a slave to a noble family and joined a long caravan on foot. The caravan set out from Rome, with its destination being the ancient city of Pompeii, a journey spanning 300 kilometers. As the caravan moved on, one of the horses pulling the cart stumbled into a puddle and was injured, collapsing to the ground and crying out in pain. Seeing this, Milo, who knew how to treat the horse, wanted to step forward to help. However, the slave overseer refused to unlock his chains and even punched Milo. The noblewoman Cassia immediately scolded the overseer and crouched down beside the injured horse with Milo. Following Milo's instructions, she pressed down on the horse's injury and felt firsthand as Milo forcefully reset the dislocated bone into place. The horse was saved, yet the overseer insulted Milo once again, calling him a crude barbarian while hastily checking Cassia was frightened. Cassia ignored the overseer and sincerely thanked Milo. Along the way, Cassia often leaned by the carriage window, stealing glances at Milo. Her subtle emotions were evident and did not escape the sharp eyes of her maid. The caravan soon arrived in Pompeii. Cassia eagerly stepped out of the carriage, laughing and running through the bustling streets. This entire city was her home, for she was the governor's only daughter, the most cherished treasure in Pompeii. Cassia had grown up surrounded by love, which made her view the world with innocence and kindness. She cared deeply for every living being with a pure and gentle heart. Milo, however, was her opposite. He had grown up amidst violence, and even in Pompeii, he could only survive by fighting and killing. The images of his parents' brutal deaths haunted his dreams every night. Revenge was the only motivation that sustained him through his suffering and struggle. A few days later, a grand event was scheduled to take place in the prototype arena to motivate the slaves to fight harder. The arena owner made a highly enticing promise. Whoever won the championship would be freed from slavery and gain true freedom. Hearing this, Milo's blood surged with excitement, and he eagerly challenged the strongest local gladiator, the black slave Atticus. Although it was just a training match, both men gave it their all. Soon, they were locked in fierce combat. Evenly matched and unable to determine a winner, the other slaves formed a large circle, excitedly watching this fair duel. But where there is a crowd, there are always opportunistic villains. Someone secretly took out a small knife and suddenly aimed to stab Milo in the back. Atticus swiftly pushed Milo aside and kicked the knife away. Afterward, Atticus told Milo that he wasn't saving him, he was upholding the spirit of gladiators. He wanted to fight honorably, and even if he were to lose, he would rather die gloriously and cleanly in the arena. But Atticus firmly believed he would not lose. When the day of the competition came, he vowed to kill Milo himself and claim the sole prize of freedom. However, the desire for freedom was not exclusive to slaves. In the rigidly hierarchical society of Rome, The emperor was the supreme ruler, below him were the senators, the next tier of power. Even noble families like Cassia's had to bow to the whims of these politicians. Senator Corvus, infatuated with Cassia's beauty, had pursued her all the way from Rome to Pompeii. He pressured Cassia's father with threats and bribes while romantically proposing to Cassia with feigned sincerity. No matter how many times Cassia rejected him, he pretended not to hear. He didn't care about Cassia's feelings. He was simply enjoying the act of proposing. Corvus knew that with just a slight display of his authority, he could bring Cassia's entire family to its knees. Cassia seemed to glimpse her inevitable fate. She feared becoming a caged canary under Corvus' control, and her unease and dread grew stronger by the day. That night, Cassia's favorite white horse became uncontrollable. She specifically requested Milo to calm the horse, but in truth, it was an excuse to see him again. Two people who were never meant to meet sat hidden in the stables. Engaging in an intimate and heartfelt conversation, Milo shared his story with Cassia, revealing that his parents and tribe had been slaughtered by Corvus. He would never forget the sight of the eagle banners carried by Corvus's army. Now his enemy was right in front of him, but as a slave bound in chains, he had no chance for revenge. Cassia was deeply moved by Milo's plight and suggested that he take the white horse and flee immediately. That way, he could escape the chains of slavery. Milo did not respond. Instead, he silently extended his hand to Cassia. Without hesitation, she took his hand and jumped onto the horse's back. Cassia knew exactly what this meant, but she was unwavering. She was willing to abandon her noble status to pursue freedom and embrace love. But while the imagination is beautiful, reality is often disappointing. If only his slave escaped, it might not have been a big deal, but with the governor's daughter involved, chaos erupted. Soon, the city's soldiers were fully mobilized, leaving the pair with nowhere to run. Cassia urged Milo to leave on his own, promising to find a way to distract the soldiers, but Milo refused. He gave up his chance for freedom because the cost of it was losing Cassia. He only wanted to stay by her side, even if it meant remaining a slave. When they were captured and brought back to the castle, Corvus raised his sword to Milo's throat. Cassia begged for Milo's life, lying that the white horse had gone wild and that Milo had saved her along the way. Lowering herself as much as possible, Cassia managed to spare Milo's life, but while Milo escaped death, punishment was inevitable. He was sentenced to a brutal flogging. Even such harsh punishment did not satisfy Corvus's rage. He already regarded Cassia as his possession and could not tolerate the idea of a slave even touching her. The gladiatorial competition commenced as scheduled, with the majority of Pompeii's citizens gathering in the grand amphitheater. The nobles sat on the most spacious and luxurious viewing platform. Today's stars were the gladiators in the arena, including Milo and Atticus. According to the original rules, they would face off in one-on-one duels until a champion was crowned, but Corvus suddenly altered the rules, changing the individual duels into team combat. He brought in a massive wooden pillar, chaining the gladiators' feet to it, restricting them to a small area. Then, he allowed slaves who weren't originally qualified to compete to join the fight. These new participants were equipped with soldiers' armor and the finest weapons. Corvus's intent was clear. He wanted the contestants to fight against overwhelming odds, 10 against 100. This was no longer a competition but a bloody massacre. The armored slaves hurled their spears and charged forward with their superior numbers. Milo quickly climbed onto a decorative rock, leading his companions to evade and strike back. This strategy was effective, giving the gladiators a temporary advantage, but the armored slaves' numbers were endless. No matter how many were killed, more kept coming. Soon, several gladiators grew exhausted and were brutally killed by iron swords. With a furious roar, Milo leaped into the midst of the armored slaves, slashing down enemies one after another with precision and power. Cassia, watching from the stands, was visibly distressed, her brows furrowing tightly. Corvus noticed her feelings for Milo and clearly sensed her love for him. Without hesitation, Corvus proposed to Cassia's parents and unilaterally announced that the wedding must take place in Rome. Cassia was powerless to refuse. If she dared to reject him, Corvus would accuse her father of rebellion, executing him and publicly hanging her family and kin on the city walls. Meanwhile, in the arena, only Milo and Atticus remained standing. Milo fought valiantly at the front, while Atticus stayed behind, chopping down the wooden pillar, crushing a large group of armored slaves beneath it. Next, Milo mounted a swift horse, using the chains to trip and topple a large number of the armored slaves. From a high vantage point, Atticus provided cover for him, even hurling his axe to strike down an enemy attempting to ambush Milo when he was pulled from his horse. The two fought with perfect coordination and managed to overcome the grossly unfair odds. Their victory earned them the respect of the people of Pompeii. The crowd erupted in cheers, demanding that both Milo and Atticus be granted their freedom. Milo, in a moment of defiance, broke the eagle banner of Corvus's army. Using the broken staff as a makeshift spear, he hurled it toward Corvus, but Corvus's guards intercepted it in time. Recklessly impulsive, Milo failed to exact his revenge and instead caused both himself and Atticus to be sentenced to death. As the two stood ready to be executed by a hail of arrows, Cassia bravely stepped forward. She declared that both men were already free. She reminded Corvus that the promise made in the arena carried legal weight. The victors must be granted their freedom. If Roman law were violated, it would inevitably lead to a slave uprising, which could spark a full-scale slave revolution. At that point, the emperor would surely punish Corvus severely. Cassia added that while she might bow to his power and marry him, even if Corvus obtained her body, he would never have her heart. Infuriated by her words, Corvus ordered his soldiers to lock Cassia in the villa. He wanted to see how long this noble lady could endure in a rundown warehouse. Suppressing his rage for the moment, Corvus decided to execute Milo in a different manner. Using the pretense of an additional match, he sent a battle-hardened elite guard to face Milo in a fight to the death. At that moment, the volcano near Pompeii erupted, spewing molten lava. A volcanic eruption is often accompanied by violent earthquakes, and this one was no exception. Terrified, people began fleeing toward the exits in a panic. In the chaos, a massive stampede broke out. Amid the powerful tremors, parts of the stone walls collapsed, sending countless stones crashing into the fleeing crowds. Moments later, the luxurious viewing platform at the highest point also gave way. A crack split the gladiatorial arena, and Milo seized the opportunity to grab the elite guard and leap into the underground prison. There, he pulled the lever to open the cages, releasing all the slaves. Seeing this, the elite guard immediately fled for his life. The freed slaves did not chase after him but instead surrounded the overseer and, in no time, beat him to death. When the tremors subsided, Milo returned to the surface. The arena was now in ruins, surrounded by countless corpses. Amid the devastation, Milo heard a faint cry for help. He followed the sound to the stands and found Cassia's mother still alive. Milo tried to save her, but her body was pinned under a stone column, making it impossible to move her. She clutched Milo's hand tightly and, using the last of her strength, told him that Cassia was locked in the villa. At this point, Pompeii was in complete chaos. The port was jammed with people, all desperately trying to board the ships. Corvus, fearing that the ships would become overloaded, drew his sword and began slaughtering civilians. The volcano erupted violently, sending a barrage of flaming rocks crashing into the city. Amid the fleeing crowds, only Milo ran in the opposite direction. His destination was the villa closest to the volcano where the woman he loved was trapped. The woman who had risked her life to defend him, willing to do anything to win his freedom. When Milo reached the villa, Cassia had already passed out from the thick smoke. Hearing Milo's calls, she slowly opened her eyes, disbelief written across her face. "For me, you turned back?" Cassia's loyal maid quickly fetched her a cup of water, urging her to drink it in large gulps. As the maid turned to fetch another cup, the villa suddenly collapsed, and she was instantly buried under a massive stone. Meanwhile, the volcano grew more furious, and the barrage of flaming rocks intensified. Several ships that had already set sail were struck and sunk. The once calm sea roared with massive waves. Amid the chaos, Atticus climbed to a high vantage point and saw an overwhelming wall of seawater rushing toward the city. He shouted warnings to the crowd, urging them to turn back, but it was too late. Most of the people crowding the port were swallowed by the tsunami. Those who escaped the flooding were crushed by falling rocks. The once thriving city of Pompeii had become a dead city, littered with charred corpses. Fortunately, Milo and Cassia encountered Atticus, who informed them that the port was gone. Their only option was to take the southern mountain path. However, traveling on foot would not be fast enough. They had to return to the arena to find horses. As soon as they entered the arena, Cassia saw the collapsed stands. She realized that this was her parents' grave and couldn't resist the urge to bid them a final farewell. Milo gave her a moment alone and hurried with Atticus to search for horses. Just as they found the white horse, Cassia vanished. It turned out that Corvus had also thought of using horses to escape via the mountain path. He had arrived at the arena ahead of them and taken Cassia from the stands. By the time Milo and Atticus returned, Cassia had been locked in a carriage. Corvus selected several fast horses and left the arena with Cassia. The elite guards were left behind as a delaying tactic to stall Milo and Atticus. In a 2-against-1 fight, the elite guards had little chance of victory, but if the battle dragged on, Milo might never catch up to Cassia. To ensure Milo's success, Atticus decided to face the guards alone. Milo mounted the swift white horse and quickly caught up to the cumbersome carriage. Cassia, seeing Milo emerge through the fiery chaos, discreetly pried off a piece of wood and used it to unlock her iron chains. Then, she suddenly lunged at Corvus. Corvus let go of the reins to defend himself. The moment he did, the carriage struck a rock and flipped over. Corvus was thrown several meters, writhing in pain from the impact. Fortunately, Cassia, still inside the carriage, was unharmed. With the horses scattering in different directions, Corvus had no escape. He had no choice but to face Milo in a fight to the death. Meanwhile, the arena was shrouded in thick, rolling smoke. Atticus fought several rounds with the elite guard but gradually began to lose ground. Seeing Atticus's waning strength, the guard seized the opportunity and struck with all his might, plunging his sharp iron sword into Atticus's unprotected body. Towering over him, the guard mocked Atticus, sneering that he was nothing but the lowest of slaves. He taunted that the greatest honor for a slave gladiator was to die, and how dare Atticus demand freedom from Rome. Atticus's eyes widened in defiance. Gripping the hilt of the sword, he endured the searing pain with the broken fragment. He stabbed it into the guard's carotid artery. "If death is such an honor, then let me grant it to you." Elsewhere, Milo and Corvus were locked in a brutal fight. Suddenly, a massive flaming rock crashed near them, stirring up a billow of thick, milky white smoke. Cassia anxiously waited for the smoke to clear, desperately searching for Milo's silhouette. To her despair, the first figure to emerge from the smoke was Corvus. As Cassia's hope faded into despair, Milo suddenly lunged like a tiger. Cassia swiftly grabbed the iron chains and locked Corvus to the overturned carriage. It was the perfect moment for vengeance, but Milo did not kill Corvus. Instead, he gazed coldly at the volcano spewing molten lava in the distance. "You see," Milo said icily, "the gods are about to pass judgment on you. You slaughtered my people, and the gods' wrath will cleanse your filthy soul." Blistering volcanic ash swept down, turning Corvus's fear and despair into a lifeless gray dust. Meanwhile, the dying Atticus raised his right hand to greet death, shouting, "I am finally free!" The white horse carried the lovers away from the doomed city, but they could not outrun death. The volcanic ash bore down upon them. The horse, burdened by their weight, could not run fast enough. Milo was willing to sacrifice himself, urging Cassia, who was more frail, to ride the horse alone to safety. There might still be a sliver of hope for her survival, but Cassia refused. She patted the horse forcefully, releasing their only chance to live. Softly, she said to Milo, "Our final moments should not be wasted on running away. Whether the eruption is a disaster or something magnificent, I just want to quietly watch it with you. I'm grateful that, in this moment of collapse, I still hold a fresh rose. I love you, with a love that will endure even in death. Our love will find eternity in this destruction." The scene fades to ash as their story ends. Thank you for watching. I'm a film enthusiast. Subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.